Hello everyone, Gammon here. So, in my foray back into anime, I got recommended a show called ssss.gridman. Now, I cannot say I hate the show or that you shouldn't watch it. I'll even recommend it if you're a younger viewer or you don't care about plot all that much. Overall, it's got a lot going on for it. It really captures the feel of old Sentai shows, or as I knew them before a quick Google search, Power Rangers. The visuals are gorgeous, and even the low frame rate of the fights can easily be explained away as an homage to the source material. The music is great, the voice acting is also terrific, and special mention goes to Rika's voice actor for managing to sound very natural and very believable. Also, the action scenes are quite a lot of fun. The plot itself is great for most of the season, as you're thrust into an odd and mysterious world to slowly unravel its mysteries, which keeps you engaged and wondering through most of the show. The reason I'm making this video is that despite everything I just said, when I finished watching Quadruple S Gridman, I was really unsatisfied and disappointed. For me to explain why I felt so disappointed, I'm gonna have to do some plot analysis, especially regarding the ending of the show, because that's the part I really disliked. In other words, I'm about to spoil the whole show, the mystery behind the world, the ending, especially everything. So if you have any interest in watching Quadruple S Gridman, stop watching now, come back later. Whether you liked it or hated it, I think what I'm gonna say will make you look at the show a little differently, and it could open up a nice conversation. Feel free to disagree with me in the comments. By the way, I know this is a popular show and I'm about to take a controversial opinion. Anyway, this has been your spoiler warning, so you've been warned. Quadruple S Gridman is a very metaphorical show, and the problem of the show seems to be that the metaphor it's constructing clashes fiercely with what's actually happening within the show. Let's get on the same page by describing the plot on two levels, literal and metaphor. So, on the literal level of the story, what you have is a city. The city is created by a god that inhabits the city and is loved by all, because this is her ideal city and she designed everyone in it to love her and everything about her. So, I'd like to define very quickly what the show means when they say she's a god, because well, the show itself never defined it. She doesn't seem to be all knowing. She even admits to forgetting things or not knowing what happened within the confines of her own city. She's also not omnipotent. She can't just make things happen. She has to either do it herself or send someone else to do it for her. But things don't just happen because she wants to. So she's not an omnipotent, all-knowing type of god. She's more of a creator god. She can create all the pieces, she can create the board on which the pieces are moving, but eventually she's gonna have to let go and things are gonna happen that are outside of her control. And because of this, because she can't control everything and things will happen outside of her control, the city will stop being her ideal city. There's going to be flaws, things she couldn't know about or things she couldn't prevent. And whenever such a flaw happens, and this can be a genuinely tiny flaw, like someone bumping into her or smushing her bread, she will send a giant monster or kaiju, however you want to say it, to destroy the city and the person she dislikes. Once this person dies, the city will get rebuilt, with that person having been dead for years. While she does this with the help of an alien, and he ends up being the real villain of the show, it seems fairly clear to me that everything she does is of her own free will. She takes real pleasure in it, and while the alien is enabling her, this is something she would have done anyway if it was in her power to do so without the alien. And this is where Hyper Agent Gridman comes in, and where the series starts. Everything I just talked about is things that you'll be discovering throughout the series. That is the hidden plot. That's the mystery that you're going to be discovering. When Gridman enters the universe, His mind and his body seem to be split into many parts, with his primary part, his consciousness, entering a boy named Yuta, who's going to be our protagonist. This makes him lose all of his memories, but him, along with Yuta's friends, form a team and they start fighting the kaiju. After they defeat the first kaiju and the city resets, they find out that people stay dead, and obviously they find out that the city resets, and they begin exploring the mysteries and fighting the monsters to protect the city from further harm. Eventually they'll discover everything I described and they'll fix the heart of the city's god. Once she realizes she has to trust people and allow chaos to exist, allow bad things to exist, she creates the universe and leaves to wherever it is gods go. Double heaven. I don't know. That's what happens on Gridman, at least on a literal level. But as I previously mentioned, Gridman is a very metaphorical show. And on a metaphorical level, it's very clearly a story about hikikomori or shut-ins. From her room having trash bags littering the floor to her complete disinterest in any social activity, Akane is in many ways your stereotypical shut-in. While she does travel around the city and leaves her literal room, on a metaphorical level, the city is her room. It's a completely orderly place where she can control everything, control everyone, and she doesn't have to deal with the chaos of everyday life. In some ways, the city also probably describes the media that otakus use to escape their real life. In this case, well, Power Rangers, or Sentai shows, however you want to call them. Anyway, this show more or less revolves around Akane, and her learning to open herself up to being hurt and being vulnerable, and leaving the safety of her metaphorical room. So, now that we're all on the same page, and we know what happens and the basic symbolism of the show, let's talk about the problems with the ending, and the show in general. So, first off, Akane literally gets away with murder. She probably created multiple monsters, causing God knows how many deaths, and having literal blood on her hands. And I'm not just talking about the monsters that happened within the show itself. This is probably not new. This is probably something she has done multiple times before Gridman ever showed up. There is really no clue as to how many people she's killed. But it's probably a lie. And this is one of my absolute least favorite anime tropes. I hate it when a villain feels bad or has had a hard childhood or whatever, and now you're just supposed to forgive him. You're just supposed to say, oh, well, he's a bad guy. He's murdered a lot of people, but he looks cute and he's real sorry, so now he's one of the good guys. No, fuck you. Okay, just no way. It does not pass mustard with me. But even as someone that really dislikes this trope, it was executed extremely poorly in Gridman. First off, there's no reason for anyone watching the show to like Akane other than pure sympathy or cheesecake. Throughout the entire show, she never really shows any positive traits. She doesn't take an active role in fixing her heart. She's jealous, angry, and she hurts everyone and damages everyone around her, treating them like her plaything. She's very Old Testament, now that I think about it. But despite of this, everyone likes her, and I can accept that. The show states that everyone she created is forced to like her, which I suppose means we can add mental rape to the list of charges against her, not that... Whatever. The people she created have to like her. Let's not think of it as rape, even though it probably kinda is. She didn't create me. She didn't create the fucking audience. And nobody watching this show has to like her. We are not within this rule. And the show does absolutely nothing to make her likable. She doesn't do a single thing that makes you think that she's a good person. She makes you think she's a weak person. She makes you think she's a pitiable person. And she does deserve pity in many ways. that's not the same as being good. That's not the same as being misguided. She's clearly a very damaged person. And yes, that does invoke sympathy. But that doesn't excuse all the things that she does. It doesn't excuse murder. So when she does unforgivable things only to be forgiven, and even worse in some ways, loved by the main cast, when she doesn't actually pay a price, it's really frustrating and incredibly disappointing. Especially when the moment of her heart being fixed is, well, beam. It's a laser beam. I mean, okay, so metaphorically speaking, what happens when our heart is fixed is, again, we're looking at a metaphor of people standing outside the door of a shut-in of a hikikomori and asking her to come out. And she does. And metaphorically, again, yes, this is a story about a shut-in. Leaving their room, leaving the comforts of a controlled environment, and learning to live in the world. That's fine, but that's not what happens. What actually happens is the hero discovering, oh yeah, I have an unknown power that is the key to solving the problem. I just fix it. I just fix everything. Fix her beam. Fix her fucking beam, cause fuck having growth, fuck showing her growing. By the way, there is no character growth on Akane, now that we're talking about that. Throughout the entire show, what happens is you reveal her character. That's very different from character growth. What happens is you slowly see behind a mask. But who she is only ever changes in one moment. And that moment is Fixer Beam. Fixer Beam! Because fuck having multiple episodes to show her growth. Just fucking Fixer Beam it. But, okay. There is an obvious counter, which is, well, this is just a metaphor. You shouldn't care about the deaths that she caused. You shouldn't care about all the atrocities. You shouldn't even care whether or not she's likable or not. Because in the end, it's her story. It's a story about a shutting finding the courage to live in a society. The deaths aren't real deaths. The kaiju aren't real kaiju, aren't real monsters. They're just there to represent her negative emotions and her desires towards society. So, two things. First thing, fuck that. No, seriously, fuck that. If you need to fall back on metaphor and theme in order to excuse away big plot details or the way characters are interacting or anything really in what is literally happening within your story, you're going to need to rewrite parts of your story because the current version isn't working. When metaphor and literal clash, that's a problem. And you don't just get to say, well, ignore what's literally happening in order for me to have my metaphor. You can do both. Okay? And you don't get to just say, well, ignore the obvious problems. Just no. Number two, the entire city and the entire world are just as real as the people that died. Why care about anyone in the city or anyone in the story if you can't view them as real? And before somebody says, well, they're not real, they're fictional characters, yes, obviously, most stories are about fictional characters, but they're all real within the story's own universe. If you rely on metaphor and say, well, this person isn't really real, this entire universe is a metaphor, you're kind of taking away any reason to care about any of them. And that's why I find this story so disappointing. It did have an interesting plot, and it delivered it well, until towards the end it fell flat on its face. It never made Akane earn her ending. It never gave us the emotional beats or the character growth that would justify its metaphor. Let's compare Akane to Futaba. Futaba is a character in an RPG called Persona 5. This will now have some spoilers for Persona 5, I guess. Akane hurts people around her and she takes pleasure in it. She deprives them of their free will. They never give you a clear reason as to why she's a shut-in, and she's rescued by somebody else without ever having to put in any effort. Futaba hurts people around her by being a shut-in, and this makes her feel anguish. She has a clear and understandable reason for why she is a shut-in. She asks to be rescued and takes an active part in changing her own heart. Despite all of this, she still has to work hard after leaving her room in order to slowly come back into society. Her good ending isn't delivered on a silver platter in one big laser beam moment. It's slowly earned, and her character flaws are also earned. This isn't a new story. This isn't a new allegory. The hermit coming out and reintegrating into society is something that has been told multiple times. And in Quadruple S Gridman, it's just not done well. Not at all. So that's why, despite enjoying most of the show and loving aspects of it, I found the ending to be a bitter disappointment. I really would have preferred it if this was just a fun show about robots fighting kaiju and a bit of mystery and school thingies mixed in. Instead, because they inserted a metaphor that had no real place in the story, and allowing someone horrible to just get away with everything they did, it left a really sour taste in my mouth, and that's a pity. I really wish it could have ended better. Anyway, that should be enough for now. Thanks for watching.